Get ready to be inspired by the great things happening in rural education. The Rural Scoop will bring you new ideas and innovative solutions. We'll dive into education issues and we'll highlight what's working in your rural communities. You'll hear from a variety of educators, administrators, professionals, and others who will provide relevant and engaging content in each episode. And now, serving up the scoop, here's your host, Dr. Melissa Sadorf.
Some folks sell into schools. Jacob Kantor opens the right doors. Online, he's the chief Dodo, the district office door opener, who's a connector helping dozens of Edtech teams earn real trust with district leaders, not just attention on a conference floor. Jacob lives where a product with evidence and relationship meet, tightening the go-to market strategy, matching solutions to actual district problems, and making sure that the people at the table can deliver once the ink dries. So today, we're going to be unpacking how districts really need to buy in 2026, what founders get wrong, what rural and small systems need from vendors, and the playbook for partnerships that lasts past the pilot. So, Jacob, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, good to be with you and your audience. Excited for the conversation.
Well, I want to start with Chief Dodo because I love that name. Tell us about what problem were you trying to solve when you were branding yourself the district office door opener? What does that look like day to day for you?
Yeah, great question. So, at first, this is year 3 for me in this consulting space. In 2 of the years, when people would ask me so what do you do? Where do you live in the ecosystem? I would always kind of try to figure out oh, I'm kind of like a realtor. I have a client that's a buyer and also a client that is the seller, and I kind of bring them together. And then I would just look at people's faces and they'd be I don't know what you're talking about. We're in education. Why are you talking to me about real estate? And I was not everyone bought a house. This is foreign to some people. So I had to refine what it was in a 30-second pitch. And I tasked a couple of friends. I kind of reached out to them and said, hey, you guys are CMOs at your huge companies. Can I pay you for your 45 minutes or an hour and take you through what I do and my process and my system? And they all agreed. And, one of them, as I was going through, what I do and, my rubric and evaluation system, he was oh, you're kind of like the Dodo. You're like the district office door opener. And he was totally making fun of me. but I instantly was that is pretty good. And I think I can totally use that. And if somebody doesn't know me and sees that and understands that I'm the door opener, you don't need to talk to me and you know what I do for a living. And if it sparks inquiry or it sparks, somebody laughing at me, that's fine too. So I tested it that week. I was at a conference and I was I want to put this on my badge. And if it failed miserably, then so be it. And I put it on my badge and I had a couple of people grab my badge and be that's pretty interesting. That's creative. So what, you work with a couple of companies? And I'm yeah, exactly. I have a couple of companies and I vet them in advance and I try to go see who's trying to solve the same needs and connect the dots. And they're it's pretty good. It's pretty good branding. Okay, I'm running, change my LinkedIn, kept putting it on my badge. And here we are a year later. I feel it's kind of a thing of its own. I just went to FETC. I had stickers. People put the Dodo stickers on the badges and
awesome.
It's kind of weird, but it works.
Yeah. Jacob, what's the moment when you know that a product is really ready for an introduction? I mean, and conversely, the moment that it isn't ready for prime time.
Yeah. So, I'll kind of take that question and even give you kind of a lay of the land of what a typical week looks like on my end. I probably get 10 to 20 companies reaching out every single week saying, this is what we solve for. We have the latest shiny science solution or CTE, or you name it, AI tool, or we're selling desks into schools. Like, how do we sell more desks? And, traditionally I would, at least in my first 2 years, I would say, that's awesome. Like, let's have a conversation and do a deep dive on your solution. And I've kind of refined that over the last year, that I kind of want to put them through a very intentional screener to say, what do you solve for? What's your website? Do you have a demo? Do you have data around what you say you solve for versus what it actually does? Do you have testimonials from other schools that are using it or other districts? Do you have, white papers that are not written by your marketing department on what you actually do? And like, some of these questions are very intentional around like, are you ready to go talk to people? But some of them are also, hey, do you have a budget set aside for working together, right? Like, you are asking for a service, and there's only the time in the day, and there's limited resources, also limited people to go talk to. So if we take this adventure together, like, there is a cost for this. So I kind of put all of that to everybody up front and say, if you can fill these out, I will review everything and I will get back to you with some thoughts. And I'll also look at the demo, and like, if we have a 1 hour Zoom, awesome. If we don't, I'll also give you some feedback, and maybe it's not me, maybe it's somebody else in the network that is worth talking to. But I kind of intentionally now make the organization do a little bit more legwork in advance, because I found myself the first 2 years spending 30 hours a week talking to companies and being like, I don't think I'm actually like getting any work done. Like, I'm meeting lots of great people, but I'm not like being productive for the people who actually hire me to do work.
Yeah. Yeah. What are the guardrails that you share with those people that you work with before you walk in to talk to a superintendent or a CFO?
Yeah. So some of it comes down to like the coaching that's done in advance. And a lot of it is really like, and you know this really well, right? Like, education is a relationship game, right?
Yes.
So people want to do business and spend time with people that they know have their best interest at heart and have broken bread with, and know their families, and know that this person, like, once they make a sale, isn't long gone and switching companies and you'll never hear from them again. So a lot of it really comes down to making sure the companies are ready for a thoughtful conversation to build a relationship, right? Like, my goal for them always is, if we can go an hour or 45 minutes and we don't even bring up a demo and we don't talk about your solution and yes, if somebody asks, let's talk about it. Let's show it if they're really interested, but let's get to the meat and potatoes of how that person got in their role. Like, where were they before they were a superintendent here, right? Because everyone has a unique story. And sometimes we think like, oh, they've been a superintendent for a long time, they must have it. Sometimes you learn like, actually they were a teacher and then a principal, and then there was an opening and there was, a mad dash to find a superintendent, and that person was actually asked to be it. And they had no prior qualifications as a superintendent, but here we are 20 years later, and they've been serving across multiple districts. Yep. So I like those back-end stories because I feel it helps the company and even myself connect with those educators, because I think at the end of the day, what brings us all together, right? We're trying to move the needle for students. We're trying to move the needle for teachers to be happy in their roles. We're trying to move the needle for parents to be happy at home and provide for their kids. But like the whole ecosystem, has to work together. So I feel like when the vendors are ready, we're having really intentional conversations in advance to say, hey, did we do our homework on this district? Did we review their LCAP plan? You have a math solution. Like, have we looked at like their math scores last year? Have we looked at like, is math a part of their strategic plan? So I want them to really do that deep dive and own that process before we go to a district. But then, on the flip side, a lot of the districts I work with and county offices of ed and even state leaders now I will kind of, when I bring them a solution, I'm just really upfront. I'm like, hey, I'm working with a new company. This is why I'm excited about them, right? They were referred to me through a district leader that I really trust because they are moving the needle for their district. And just for an example purposes, I had a recent client and they do outcomes-based contracting, and the district that referred them put them on one of these contracts, and it worked so well, they were able to triple their contract the next year.
Wow.
When does that ever happen? Never ever, right? So as the superintendent reached out to me and said, hey, there's a really good solution, I think you should talk to them. I said, of course, A, I will always take a referral from somebody I trust, but B, what makes you, say that? And I got that backstory and I was like, yeah, if they're doing great work and you're a very, you're a hard judge of character, if you really like them, I'm going to for sure like them because they're doing right by families and all that. So really, make it spelling out why the company got me excited beyond the, hey, they're helping offset my mortgage and my kids' diapers or any of that kind of stuff. But really, kind of spelling it out like, hey, this solution is backed by 𝐄𝐲 Zuckerberg or the Gates Foundation, and they have some early wins. They're working with these districts. Here's a demo, would like to put them on with you if it makes sense. But also if it doesn't, that's okay too. You're much busier than I am. And if it makes sense, cool. If it doesn't, that's okay. And I think that, I try to value everyone's time in advance to say, hey, I'm requesting some time from you, but if this doesn't make sense for you, no hard feelings ever. There's not enough time of the day to be grumpy on, somebody not getting back to me here.
Yeah. So, Jacob, there's been a shift in district buying since ESSER, when we were just flooded with cash, right? And the AI wave has come and we're all dealing with that too. So from your vantage point, can you talk a little bit about how decision cycles and criteria have shifted now that those ESSER dollars are no longer infused in the system, and now that we've got AI kind of flooding the market with different solutions?
Yeah. What a time that was, right? And it's crazy to think it's, January 2026, and that was March 2020, and then the flood of dollars into the system. It's interesting, right? As I reflect on COVID, right? There was an unprecedented amount of dollars in the system and a lot of shiny tools, right? So, yeah, as I was reflecting on this for years now, part of me was always like, really? You bought that? But then I had to question my judgment there and say, if a district that never had an extra $100 million got that kind of money in their bank account, and there was a solution that said, we will move the needle based on X, Y, Z that you're trying to solve for, that was probably the time to actually try it and see if it works. And if it works, double down on it. And if it didn't, cut it. The interesting thing I've seen, and this isn't representative of the whole country, is there was a lot of solutions during that time that got purchased that didn't move the needle. And people kind of swept it under the rug and were like, all right, moving on. What are we going to try? And I am such a, my wife and I, we live in Los Angeles. We're foodies. Before we go to a new restaurant, we're like, let's look up the menu. What are people saying? And I don't think that there's that kind of system for EdTech tools. Mm-hmm. Yes, Digital Promise has a database of, or people have evidence, and there's, some badging across a couple of companies, and Instructure has a version of it. But there wasn't a safe place for, district leaders to say, hey, I tried that product. Good luck with it. If it works for you, it did not work for us. And I don't know if part of that is there's a reluctance to say, hey, I got this one wrong.
Sure.
Right? In the tech space, in the, you name it, in other industries, right? It's you try things, some things work, some things don't. And I don't know at the highest levels, or, the CFOs, the CBOs, there's and again, just my opinion, so not representative of everyone, but it seems like they'll have group chats to talk about solutions working and not working, but on like a larger stage, everyone's kind of reluctant to say, that was really good marketing and we bought it, but we did not renew it. Here's the reasons why. And I think like we almost have to norm that it's okay to say we tried something and it didn't work for our kids. Maybe the solution didn't work. Maybe the implementation didn't work. Maybe I'm cognizant that sometimes it is a district priority and it's purchased and then it becomes not a district priority, or somebody leaves. And then there's many balls that get dropped everywhere. But I think this idea of like talking about the solutions that don't work, like we have to norm that that's okay, at least from that time, because there's still some of the solution providers that are still selling in today's time that didn't work then. But anyways, but back to the question, I think a lot of it comes down to, are they providing evidence that this works, right? Like they have white papers showing that there's growth. Like now you can do, Instructure has a solution where a company can actually pay for a service that is like evidence of efficacy. So you can partner with Instructure. There's a cost, but they on their end will take their like data scientists, also like partner districts, or you can bring a district, and they will do like a 10-week A versus B trial and give you a report saying this actually worked, or hey, we thought this would work and we saw that it only worked in these grades, but for these other students, like we did not see that correlation, right? And those, for early companies, there are costs. So I'm cognizant that like no organization will be able to do that. But truly, like some of the skin in the game now is, does this work? Is this better than what we are currently doing? Like, do we have a budget for it, considering it is not ESSER time, right? So I think like some of the trends I'm seeing nationwide is people are asking very difficult questions from the vendors, which is awesome, right? Like, show me exactly what you do, how you do it, and show me who else is using it across the country. And I feel like sometimes, I was on with a client, and just an anecdotal story. They were on with the district, and the district said, hey, who else is using it? And I don't know what went through this vendor's head, but they said, oh, well, this is our like first meeting. Like, I'm happy to give you all of that on our second meeting. And for a split second, I was like, why did we think that was a good idea? We are not dating the district. They are allowing us, they are giving us some time to talk about their whatever opportunity here. They asked a question, a very like, and same question that comes up on and we thought it was a good idea to be like, well, we'll tell you that on the next one. And if I'm that district, I'm like, there will not be a next one.
Right.
You can't give me some basic answers to my questions. And look, sometimes there's like in-depth questions that's on the technology, and like, it's hey, can I like, before I give you an answer that's not correct, I would like to ask much smarter people about the technology. Like, is it okay if I get back to you and you have my word, I'll get back to you with those questions? Not saying okay, but like using it as like a lead-in into a second meeting, I had to stop and be like, that's a new one for me. I have not seen that. This turned into like a dating game of like, that person will not go on another meeting date with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you talk a lot about trust, and that's an example of how not to build trust. But besides that, what behaviors from vendors really build trust the fastest? And you gave a good example of a behavior that can kill a deal without even trying, even if the product is good. But are there other things that you've seen that probably don't work in their favor when they're trying to show we've got a good solution here?
Yeah. I think some of it comes down to kind of what we chatted about a couple minutes ago around like doing the research on the district.
Sure.
Coming to the call or the meeting or the in-person saying, hey, like we've actually spent a good chunk of time like doing a deep dive on what we think you're solving for. Please poke holes at our assumptions. Like we saw your scores, we saw your LCAP plan. Like, is it safe to think that you guys are working on math or ELL or like, and then like start the conversation off there beyond, of course, like building the relationship and finding out, more about them, but really doing that research. I find that a lot of the times I'm sure you had this as a superintendent over and over again, right? Is like, what's keeping you up at night? And like, every day is different, right? Like I just had an event on Tuesday where we had like a director from Apple, a director from ByteDance, and a superintendent on a panel. And like before the session that day, there was a walkout at the district where kids just walk. So like that day, that was the biggest fire that person was dealing with, right? The next day, it's going to be a fight on campus. The next day, it's going to be kids aren't showing up, it's attendance. The next day, it's going to be cell phone policies. The next day, it's going to be a board. So there's so many competing fires that always come up that like from day to day, it varies so much that like just coming into a meeting and saying like, so what's keeping you up at night is like, well, what day is it? And what month is it? And so, if we can guide the conversation a little with doing some research and, going back to kind of your question with all things AI, right? Like I use Perplexity a ton. I use ChatGPT. I use Claude. I use them all, but like, I personally love Perplexity for myself because I can kind of assign it to do some research. I mean, you could do this in any model now, but I could go to Perplexity and say, in Los Angeles County, there's 81 districts. Can you please pull every LCAP and organize it for me based on if any of those LCAPs are talking about math support? And now when I go to that meeting with LA County or with one of the districts, I can kind of just say like, hey, I didn't spend 10 hours on this, but like I did do some research and I noticed that within your strategic plans, you are talking about this. Can you tell me more about that? Because that'll help shape how I guide our conversations or the questions I ask. And I generally think, and I love your take on this too, is if a vendor can come to a meeting prepared and really know what that person is dealing with on a strategic plan, I think the conversation changes. Like it's a partnership talk versus like get to know you, let's talk about the product. It just seems like the dynamic changes.
Yeah. Well, if people care enough to do the homework, they care enough to be around after you've bought the product, right? Yeah. And I think it's a foundational piece to relationship building. And if you're not doing that, that tells me something about you too.
Yeah. And I'm also cognizant that like, if, I take myself back to COVID days and I was selling myself at a company before consulting, I would wake up get the kids to daycare and at 9 o'clock calls would start and I would be off calls at 4 and every 30 minutes I was booked. Pre-AI time. So I can only fathom that I had very limited research on all things that folks I was talking to. But now, like, if you're not using AI to your advantage in that way, like that is a missed opportunity. I'll tell you another anecdotal story is, I have a great partner at Orange County Department of Ed, and I know him well enough that he is going to do his research on the company that I am asking him to meet. So when we show up on his end, he's like, I have all the info on you. I did research. Is this true? And it's really funny because I'll tell the company like, hey, he's going to do a ton of research on you. Like, this is not your common person that you're meeting with. He's going to come with questions for you. You should do your research on him too, because if after you answer his questions, you say, hey, we did research on you too. Are these things accurate? Because we saw it makes it a more pleasant conversation. Ultimately, we just want to do business with people we like, right?
Sure.
So if we could have like thoughtful conversations, and if we don't demo it during that meeting, like I'm just a big believer in, I would rather have a 1 hour meeting with somebody and learn about their kids and learn about how they became a superintendent or at the county. And then at the end of that call, if we didn't demo, I'm okay saying, you know what, we're running out of time, and like, hey, I have to go. So do you. Can we book time where I can actually just show you what it is? And like, this could be in a month, but like, this was pleasant enough where I think like there might be synergy or there might. And most times if you've built enough rapport on that hour, somebody's going to be like, yeah, let's take a look at the calendars. Like, this was good. We all like to talk, right? Like, we all like to talk about our families, our hobbies, what we spend the most time with. I just found that if you can like be intentional on getting to know somebody, that person is going to potentially want to work with you. It might not be next month, it might not be this year, but eventually there will be an opportunity to have a more in-depth conversation about like working together closely.
Yeah. I want to step into rural or small school districts, because that's obviously who I work with. And talk to me, Jacob, about how you vet whether a solution is going to fit, human capital issues, very, rural systems that have, long transportation routes, limited budget, limited PD time. Those are all things that rural schools are dealing with. So before you propose to a superintendent or a CFO, hey, think about this solution, what kinds of things do you think about?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of it will be on the vendor side, where I'll ask them for like, show me everyone you're already working with. And then let's source this by large states, obviously, but then also like large district, small district, medium size, rural. So I'll make them do that research in advance. But then I feel like what I've been doing recently as well is I will actually, which is funny because I feel like I have it literally on my table. 1 second. I have
my Rural Matters report. Yes.
So this like lives, I mean, I'll give you some of my other things here too. I have like an ELOP guide. I have like the Los Angeles County strategic plan here too. But this like lives on my, I swear that I did not plan that. That was there. But I really liked that report. And then before this one, the previous one that was really visual.
Yes.
Like, I'm a visual learner. So when I like looked at that initially, I said, hey, these are great visuals for me to share with all of the vendors that are potentially going to work with me. If they work with me, awesome. If they don't, that's okay too. But like, hey, where are you based? You're in Arizona, or you're in Texas, or you're in North Carolina? Like, let's start with your own state. What does it look like in your own state that you service, where you can go visit some schools and districts? Like, what is the population of students in that state that are small and rural? And like, I think that executive summary lays it out so well for me. And I swear I talk about this on every call I have with potential new vendors is, I mean, I think the stats, unless they've changed, right? It's like 10 million K through 16 students. Yeah. When people hear that from me, they kind of think I'm like lying until I send them the link. And I'm like, no, I'm not lying. Like, you could look at, this is factual info that you can look up yourself. Like, there are, close to 800,000 rural students in Texas alone. And, people kind of hear that and they're like, oh, well, we were talking to you about LAUSD, but like Texas seems interesting. And I'm like, hey, I was not talking to you about LAUSD. That is a Titanic ship that is going to be very hard to work with. But like, I'm not saying like rural isn't hard to work with either, but like there are different paths to success. So now like I use that quite often with talking to any company to say, hey, first let's look at who you're already servicing. Like, where is this already working? Because we might be able to pinpoint trends. That way, when we go attempt to talk to people, we can actually already just point to it and say, we're actually already servicing these districts, and they are, while they might not be in your state, they are technically small and rurals. And like, I love your take on it too. Like, I feel like if you are a small and rural district and a company is already servicing a different state in that capacity, does that like get you more excited that this company might already know how to work with districts like themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the things that is a concern when you're looking for potential solutions is there's not real pricing. They don't have an understanding of some of the barriers, whether it's geography or it's broadband concerns or it's distance to get people to professional development. I mean, there's a whole host of things. Have they already thought about what those barriers to entry are so that I feel comfortable knowing, they understand rural, they get it. They're willing to work with me because they've done it in this system or that state. And I can see proof of concept. I know that I'm going to be taken care of, even though I'm a small or a rural, because they've done it before.
Yeah. It takes me back also to the panel we had at your national conference, and what Matt Winters was chatting to us about in one of the sessions he had before our session, where like in Utah they have like fiber laid across 90% of the state, so it's like the last 10% of the districts and schools and kids don't have fiber, and they're working on that. And I'm like, yep. How long did that take? It's been like a 20-year project, but like I don't know of another state that, I'm sure there are, but I don't know of another state that has it broadband figured out like Utah has. And on top of that, right, like just learning Matt's background and him training basically every teacher in the state on all things AI. And you're like, wow, you guys are more significantly further along in advance than others. And not to say that like the folks in California aren't that, they are, different population of 6 million students here and educators, but like it really even opened up my eyes that they're thinking about things differently, right? I think one of Matt's colleagues was talking about, there's one school that's across the lake, and the cost to get fiber through the lake would be a little bit. So we will figure out what to do there. But like, that is how we're thinking about even the kids that are the 7 kids that go to school out there. And I was like, wow, this is a different mindset on serving kids. And like, yeah. That was refreshing to me and got me very excited that like things like that are happening, because that's not always the case.
Jacob, that makes me wonder, can you talk a little bit about some of the pricing or contract structures that you've seen vendors put together for smalls or rurals, the things that work best, that if I was a superintendent listening to this, I might not know that there are things that they can think about as far as those kinds of structures?
Yeah. And I'll even kind of use Utah as an example in that response as well. A number of years ago, as AI was booming and Magic School and Brisk and some of these solution providers were, calling on all the districts and saying, look what we got, they actually came together and said, hey, as a state, let's negotiate these contracts and we will get preferred pricing at a amount that is not going to change. And they, as a state, took that on. I don't know of other states. I'm sure that that's out there, but I also wonder, like in California with SSDA or in Arizona or with TRDA in Texas, is like, could they do some of that legwork to get preferred pricing for the districts? And then also, like, could the vendor also carve out a donation back to the organization as a thank you? And we know, everyone's nonprofit, so it's not like somebody is getting rich on a donation back. But so preferred pricing and consortium pricing for sure. It almost takes me back to like in New York and New Jersey, there's like the BOCES where, you know, they have a system in place where if multiple districts want a solution provider, they can get a BOCES contract, and then the state will reimburse, I think it's like 75 or 80% of the cost, which is a really big savings back to that district.
Wow.
But, you know, one thing I've seen recently, and I had a conversation this week about, was all things outcomes-based contracting, where, you know, for those who are listening that are not familiar with it, it puts the ownership on both the district and the vendor to come together and say, what are we looking to solve for? If it's tutoring, right? Like, what are the metrics that is going to make this a successful partnership? Like, can we expect that 100% of the kids are going to show up to the sessions? Not realistic. Can we expect that over 65% show up and there are systems in place to encourage it to go higher? Yes. How do we get that? Like, we make sure that the tutors are always on, they're communicating. We have systems in place to do reminders for parents, but then there's also responsibilities of the district as well, right? Like, what is the district doing to encourage that as well? So the way like outcomes-based contracting works is, so there's a base rate. Let's say a solution costs $10. The district agrees to pay $5 base up front. Like, we are giving you 50% of this contract as activation. The rest of the 50% is actually broken down into what outcomes we come up with together, right? Have we delivered sessions we said we would deliver? Cool, that might be 25% of that contract. Have we moved the needle on math scores because that was why you bought this? That's another 25%. So that way, like, you have a base of half of it, and then there's incentives to make that contract whole. And I've seen districts also put in kickers, like, if we improve and we double the rates that we're targeting, there is actually an earnout to even get a bonus for the product. And like, you know, you've sat in the seat, like, would you pay a vendor a bonus if they over delivered and your kids all ended up being proficient in whatever you were trying to solve? Like, my gut tells me I know the answer.
Yeah, well, yes, if that was part of the contract that we agreed to, and my kids are, you know, they got more than a year's worth of growth out of a product that I only needed 6 months. Yeah, I'd probably say, yeah, you've done what I've asked you to do and more. And we'll honor that part of the contract. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's kind of really interesting to me in my world right now. And I'm kind of encouraging all organizations that I work with to just do a deep dive on it before. That way, when we get to those conversations, if somebody's familiar with that model or they're not familiar with that model, to really just say, hey, we're open to discussing ways where, like, will you hold us accountable and we will do the same for you to make sure this is successful, right? Like, this implementation to help your teachers, your students, your parents, like, this is a partnership and we're in this together, right? Like, yes, we have the tool, but like, we also need to lean on you as a district to help us with implementation and fidelity of implementation. Yeah. And like, I think that's a really great conversation to have, right? Like, we're spending taxpayer dollars on solutions that are hopefully going to move the needle. Like, let's have a really in-depth conversation and say, what is this going to take to make this successful, like, from both sides?
Yeah. Yeah. You want to jump a little bit further into that, Jacob, because part of that whole process is professional development.
Yep.
And can you talk a little bit about what models you've seen that actually lead to that fidelity of implementation, 90 days post-launch? And then what do they typically look like in a rural community? Obviously, it's not cost effective to go face-to-face, although that might be something that's chosen. Usually those kinds of things happen online. But what is it about the model of professional development that actually leads to that fidelity you're talking about?
Yeah, I think it depends on how new and how large the organization is that's going into rural. Because I found that, like, I've had a couple of partners that were relatively new, but they said, whatever it takes. If you work with us, tell us when we need to be there, and we will spend the week to make sure that we launch this properly with all your teachers and that your kids are set up. And if we have a hiccup, because we're going to have a hiccup, we're there to help support you. I'm cognizant that like every company is not that company, right? That is a new company trying to get some White House accounts. But, you know, on the rural side, I've seen professional development online. I've also seen things where like multiple districts locally are doing something. So they'll almost have a PD, but invite other districts to say like, hey, just come experience what this is, what the other district is doing. And that kind of like helps at least the company realize like this isn't just a cost to send somebody to train. But, you know, it takes me back to, so I'm dating myself now. So 2007, 2008, as I worked at McGraw-Hill, I was a fresh college graduate in peak recession time. I visited 30 schools a day, pre-iPhone, pre-Garmin, MapQuest. So for all of the listeners who know what MapQuest is, I salute you. If you don't, you are young, and I salute you too for having lots of energy and not drinking coffee like I drink. But, you know, I visited 30 schools a day during that time. LAUSD was piloting a program called Treasures. I worked for McGraw-Hill, and they ended up buying Treasures. And then they kind of went to all of us that were helping with the pilot and said, we need you to go train now. Would you like to do that? And, you know, my question back to them, my question to their question was, I'm 24. I've never been in the classroom. Are you sure you would like me doing PD? I'm happy to learn the product, but like, I have to be completely honest with everybody and I grew up in LAUSD. My kids now go to LAUSD. I'm like, I'm going to have to tell people the honest truth that I've never been a teacher. And like, I'm here to help them, and I will answer their questions with the best fidelity I can. But there are questions I'm not going to be able to answer, and we're going to argue on them, and I'm going to get the answers to them. But like, you know, I take myself back to those days of like, I don't know that those teachers that got trained by Jacob Kantor, sorry for all those LAUSD teachers, had the best training. I'll just name it. Like, I feel like the honesty of a 24, 25-year-old of being like, I'm not going to have all the answers. I'm here to help, but like, you guys are the experts. I'm here to just facilitate like what this looks like. If we have, I'm going to take all your questions every night, and every night I'm going to type them up to much smarter people than me, and they're going to answer those questions, and I'm going to see you for 3 days. So like the next day I'm going to answer all these questions, and we're going to have a bank of all Q&A. And like, maybe they took pity on this LAUSD kid, but like, I didn't get fired. So that's not here or there on the question you asked. But I think, you know, there's creative ways to really make sure programs launch properly. Sometimes it doesn't require in-depth, you know, hand-holding, and other times it does, right? So it's like, is the organization providing, you know, tutorial videos? And if it's a parent-facing or a student-facing product, are there how-to videos? Are there videos about why the district is doing this? You know, I'll give you an example of a solution provider recently where they launched with a large district, but they also launched with a private school. And the private school said, we would like to make our own videos. Is that okay? And we said, tell us more, like what's on your mind? And they said, we would like to take all of your materials, but we would like the voice to be our heads of school saying, here's why we're doing this. We as a group and as a leadership team came together and said, what problems are we trying to solve? And one of the problems was X. After reviewing 10 solution providers, we landed on one. We're going to introduce you to the one today, but this was the head of school saying this, right? So not like the company who's going to be selling the solution. And that was really neat to me because they were hearing from the head of school of where they choose to send their kids. And it was private school, so they're paying tuition to go there. But I had like an aha where I was like, this is really effective. Like, just as a buy-in for all parties, the head of school being like, hey, these are my words. I'm giving you why we're doing this. And I was like, this is pretty effective. And think about how many times that programs are rolled out because somebody has a good idea and it's not communicated to anybody. And then you just show up to a PD and you're like, wait, what are we here to learn about? Oh, AI. Okay, got it. Like, so there's like no buy-in in advance. So
right.
I wonder if that could be replicated. And, we're talking about very busy individuals at districts, at small rurals. I was on with somebody that, said, hey, they're helping drive the bus, but also helping with curriculum, and also wearing the superintendent hat and also doing something else. And you're like, that is a lot of jobs for one person. So I'm not sure that person is going to take on the role of rolling out a program like that. But like, I wonder if we can set up a model where like, hey, this happens elsewhere. Like this 10-minute video that you're going to spend an hour on might have your teachers buying into this because you can give them the backstory of why. Like, why is this happening? It's like defining civic, right? Like, start with the why, right? Like, why are we this? What are we trying to solve for? And like, what, almost like welcoming and inviting them, like, come on this ride together. Our goal is to have the kids do X, Y, and Z, and we think this will solve for it. Help us, be our partner on this journey. And I just got like the shivers thinking about it.
Yeah, that's exciting. So we're in a new year, 2026, and everybody's putting out their conference circuit information and all of that stuff. And you spend a lot of time, as do I, at conferences and inside communities of practice and interacting with superintendents across the country. Can you talk, Jacob, a little bit about the events or networks that actually are moving deals and learning and what do people just need to be aware of as, hey, this is a cannot miss conference, whether they're a vendor trying to sell a product or they're a district leader that wants to get more information about new solutions that are out there?
Yeah, so I just got back from FETC in Orlando. That was the first time I attended. 450 plus vendors, 1,000 speakers. Like that was a very large conference for sure. That was the first time I went. I would definitely be going back. And I'm a pretty big critic on conferences. If I didn't like it, I would just be like, no, I didn't. I won't be returning to that. But FETC was awesome. Jen Womble there who runs it. Great conference. The next one I'll be going to is in San Diego, which is all things like educators in the state of California. Then for the first time, I'm actually going to South by Southwest. So I can't say if that will be a big home run or I'll just be enjoying myself in Austin for a couple of days. But, ASU GSV is always a great one. I've personally never been to AASA, but I know that's going on in New Orleans. It is a good one. Yep. Yeah. In February, I hear really good things about that. But, there's also some that like I never heard about until I really started asking the same question you just asked me, right? There's like RTM and ERDI and IEI, where as a district leader, you actually, there was an RTM event recently in LA where districts from across the country flew in, and they also have probably like 20 or 30 different solution providers. And in advance, the district will actually almost put like a wish list together. Like, here's the things that if they are there, I really would like to learn about. And whatever the, AI, tutoring, professional development, whatever that looks like. And what RTM and the RDI and II does is they'll take that data and like try to pair thoughtful conversations in advance. And then while you're there, you're kind of building deeper relationships as well. And I think they do these like almost like Shark Tank pitches where everybody gets to pitch for 2 minutes. And then afterwards, like people read it and they're like, that actually sounds interesting. Like, I want to learn more about that. So it gives the ownership on the educator to kind of raise their hand and say, this seems kind of interesting. I'm interested in learning more. What does this cost? Where are you already working with? So those conferences seem like they're a big hit always. And they're kind of all across the country. I think I saw Jen and Jeff are doing ERDI in New Mexico or somewhere over the next a week or so. So there's lots of opportunities for district leaders to get involved, but then with solution providers, totally reach out to. But then, plug to your conference as well, right? Last year was the first time that I attended in Utah. And it was not because I didn't want to, but it was always on Halloween. And my wife was always like, if you miss Halloween, you might as well not be here for November. And I was like, oh, okay, no problem. I'll be at Halloween. So that was fun in Utah. And I think I met, a lot of state leaders. I met a lot of interesting providers. And it was interesting to just it seemed like it was very intimate. I mean, it wasn't small, right? You had 1,000, if not probably more people. But the fact that everybody was pretty open to saying what do you do? How are you trying to impact students in my state? And nobody was closed off. It was very, that was a new one for me to see, because I'm used to being at conferences where people are like, you can't sit with us. And it's like, oh, that's, like Mean Girls in real life, right? We're all trying to do right by students.
Yeah. And I would be remiss to say, if I didn't give a shameless plug, it's the National Forum to Advance Rural Education. This year it's in San Antonio, October 19th through 21st. We hope you check it out. You can go to nrea.net to get conference information. It's already up there. And we're doing a call for proposals. And hopefully we get some great showing for that. So yeah, we're excited about that. But I'm glad that you had a good experience there, Jacob. So yeah, I want to, because you are intimately involved with the tech industry and you're kind of behind the scenes on the cutting edge of what's coming up. Can you talk a little bit about the shifts that you're tracking over the next 12 or 18 months, whether it's AI, procurement, funding sources, all of that kind of stuff?
So, being 1 week removed from FETC, I'd say the majority of the programs I saw there, not all, right? There were solution providers in safety and tables and desks and science curriculum, but a good chunk of the large districts had AI infused in them, right? If it was Lego and their new CS, things that they launched where they have some kind of chips in them where it could show you what what you built, a story, and just very different toys than we played with growing up, right? But it feels like everybody is trying to solve for how do we give teachers their time back, and how do we stress teachers? And some are doing it with grading, some are doing it with curriculum, some are doing it with just tools for the student side of the house. So I feel like there's a trend on all things AI for sure, which that's been the case for 3 years. Yeah. And then one thing just for the, an idea for you and the entire NREA community, right? OpenAI just released something where every teacher in every district can have a ChatGPT premium account. And the CTO or the superintendent, all they have to do is activate the district in their system. So all of the domain. So basically anybody who has an account with that domain, it'll just automatically be free. That is pretty good. I mean, coming from somebody who pays out of pocket for a lot of these tools, if now your teachers that were a little bit reluctant because they might have not been users get access to the most powerful technology for free, that's pretty neat. And that doesn't cost anybody anything as long as they set it up through their system.
Yeah. That's
pretty cool, right? Or if they're at a Google district, right? There's 50 AI tools within Google and Gemini. And I think they just this week at the conference released, they have a partnership now with Khan Academy. They also have a partnership doing test prep with SAT, ACT. So there's so many things that you could do that wouldn't cost any money, just time on setting these things up. So I think AI is going to continue to dominate. That is my guess for sure.
Yeah. Well, Jake, I end every episode with the same question, and that is, what does the term rural advantage mean to you?
So for me, I kind of as I was prepping for that question, I almost took it as I live in Los Angeles. There's 10 million people in the 600-mile grid across, 80 districts and 1.3 million students. And I always think when I meet with leaders and when I meet with rural leaders and district leaders that have smaller populations of students, or they're in areas that I've never heard of because I live in an LA bubble, is how do we get those kids in those places the same tools that you can get in LA? Mm-hmm. How do we get those kids the same ChatGPT license, whatever that solution is? How do we get the kids in those places that traditionally wouldn't have, if it's bandwidth, if it's Wi-Fi, whatever? How do we get everybody on the same playing field? Because there's kids out there that we don't even know what they're capable of. And I got shivers just saying that. Is what could those kids be as grown-ups, and how could they make a huge impact on their families' lives, on the world, if they were given the same opportunities as kids in LA and kids in areas where it's not a little bit, off the path of the normal. So that's kind of what comes to mind as you ask that, is how do we create the same resources across, if you're a district with 37 kids and you're in the top part of California, or if you're in, Lucerne Valley or Baker, or, the places I see if I'm driving to Vegas, right? That I don't know much about, right? How do we get the same resources in those kids' hands to really make them the best that they can be?
Yeah, I love that answer. Thank you. Well, thanks for spending some time with me today and for kind of pulling back the curtain on how districts really buy and what trust is such an impactful thing when they're dealing with vendors, and how founders can really match problems with solutions that have meaning. So I so appreciate your lens on, readiness and evidence and that respectful follow through, especially as it relates to small and rural school districts where, capacity is pretty thin and every decision about budget really matters. So thanks for spending some time with me today.
Of course. Thanks for inviting me on, and hope to see everybody at the conference. And if you ever come across a 6'3" bald guy with a beard, with a Dodo on his badge, please flag me down and say hello. We'd love to meet all of your audience at some point.
That would be fantastic. And really, it's worth the conversation. So make sure that you take them up on that. So friends, if this conversation sparked an idea, take one step this next week. Name a local problem worth solving, a list of must-haves, whether it's PD or rural fit, and invite one potential partner to listen to a session before you talk features. If the Rural Scoop helps you lead with clarity and courage, please like this episode, subscribe to the show, and leave a comment with your takeaway. Share it with a colleague who cares about doing partnerships in the right way. Those signals help other leaders find us, and I read every note. So I'm your host, Melissa Sadorf, and remember, in rural leadership, our strength is our shared story. When we lead together, we thrive together. I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Rural Scoop. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep these important rural conversations going. And we'd love to hear from you, so feel free to leave a comment or share your thoughts. You can follow along and never miss a new release by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform or by following us on social. We're on YouTube at The Rural Scoop, Instagram at msadorf1, and X at msadorf03. The Rural Scoop is produced with support from 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐻 Educational Consultants. To learn more, visit 𝐓𝐢𝐬consultants.com. See you next time for more great discussions about rural education. And as always, keep leaning in to the rural advantage.